Top of the morning, everyone. Welcome to our Minerals Committee meeting. We appreciate everyone that's here. And we've got some interesting things to discuss today. Hopefully everyone is healthy, wealthy, and wise. So, Mark, when you're ready, would you call the roll?
Representative Campbell.
Here.
Representative Knapp.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Lawley.
Here.
Representative Riggins.
Here.
Representative Schmidt.
Here.
Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Excused.
Chairman Heiner.
Here.
Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know some of you have been ill and struggling with some of the things that are going around the House chamber, but grateful that you're healthy enough to be here. Today we have a couple of bills. We'll start with 119. Senator Hicks, why don't you lead us off?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, first I want to thank your chairman for taking care of a dawdling, old, absent-minded senator this morning. Appreciate the phone call to remind me that this bill was up before your committee. So without his help, I wouldn't be here. I'd still be just wandering around the catacombs of the Capitol, trying to figure out where I was supposed to be. So it's always nice to have House representatives take care of your senior citizens. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this is an old friend. And so I would need to take you on a little bit of history lessons here so you understand why this is coming back. So this is a piece of legislation and it was intended all along to simplify the budget. And so you've got a handout out and to explain the bill, I have to explain that Rube Goldberg machine right there. But the history of this thing is it's been something that we've worked on for a number of years. Last year, this passed out both houses, and the intent is to do of one thing, and that is to absolutely simplify so you don't have to spend 10 years on the appropriations committee to understand where the money comes from and where it goes. And so that was the entire purpose of starting to get rid of all the coffee cans that we have all over and all the schemes and the guarantees and the tips and all the other stuff out there. So that's what SIPA repeal was designed to do. Like everything, once you start unwinding stuff, some people get nervous as to what's actually going on. So the easiest way to do this is to walk through the graph. But members of the committee, I say we, both bodies passed this out last year with super majorities or on both sides of the House for the very purpose it's designed to start to simplify things. Our chief executive exercised his right with his line item veto, except for he got extracurricular active associated with the repeal on his veto, and we had timed out and we were gone. And the effect of the veto is that ended up striking existing language because the way we draft things, we draft them and then we put existing statutes in there, just so you can read it and it makes sense. So it's not like they do in Congress. You can read it in context of the whole paragraph, and advertently or inadvertently, they actually struck out existing law, that's our purview is to write laws and appropriate money. And as a result of that, it basically appropriated about $400 million out of that and then reallocated that. And so Management Council looked at this, tried to figure out there was a number of remedies, and this seemed to be the best remedy is just bring it back, redo it, make it so it can't be line item veto and get it across. And so I'm not going to go into the whole veto message. You can read that for yourselves. Some of the things that was in there, quite frankly, I disagree. I agreed with some of it, and some of it I disagreed with. But the simple fact is this was a product of the Capital Finance Committee, just to bring the same bill back, get it back into the process and get it through. I have no idea, but it didn't get the 2/3 vote in the House, even though it had a majority over there. Being the original author of this a couple of years ago, I picked it up and brought it back. So that's why we're here today, is to bring back the same exact legislation that we passed last year that was vetoed and to bring it back and try to get this corrected. In my conversations with the chief executive, I think we've corrected some of his concerns with this. Looking at an engrossed version here, I'll talk about that real quick. But more than anything, let me walk you through what SIPA repeal does. And so if you will pick up your graph, your flow chart. So you'll see that you have general fund on there. So you look on that left-hand column and the general fund. So anything over the 2.5%, you see the 2.5%, anything over the 2.5%, that's 2.5% of the spending policy. That flows down and it goes to either the legislative stabilization reserve account or the SIPA. So the first thing you need to understand, these are general fund monies that are flowing through. It's general fund money that flows into the LSRA or flows into the SIPA. So what we've basically done is saying if it's general fund money, why don't we just appropriate out of the general fund? And so we eliminate that SIP account, that separate account. It doesn't take away anybody's ability to appropriate money out of the LSRA. The money's still there. It's general fund money. We're just not sending it through. The other thing that it does is once you get rid of the SIPA, so if you go down and get rid of the SIPA, the next thing it does is it has another box that points over there to another pot of money. And so let me explain. So what the SIPA is 1.25% of the 2.5% that then we transfer 0.45% of the 0.1 or the 1.25%. Does that make sense to anybody? So let me repeat. So out of the 1.25% of the 2.5% above the spending policy, 0.45% of that is then transferred to the school foundation program account. Seems like a pretty torturous way just to get a little money into the school foundation program account, folks. So what SIPA does is it eliminates those two boxes. The SIPA repeal gets rid of those two boxes. It's general fund money. It's available for appropriations. Anything over the 2.5% flows into the LSRA. We can appropriate out of that account. Now, what the engrossed version does is because you've heard the narrative, oh my God, if we get rid of this, we're going to destroy our public school systems. There's just not going to be any money out there. So what the engrossed version does is to say, look, the money is always available. The general fund backs up everything. It backs up the school foundation program. It backs up everything in the budget. The money was always available there to appropriate or out of the LSRA. So right now in the LSRA, we have an auto appropriation. Every year, the school foundation program goes right to $100 million, transfers right into the school foundation program account. So we're gonna fund our schools. We're constitutionally obligated, but some folks are concerned that that money's just going to disappear and it's never going to show up. And so what the engrossed version does is, so if you go over there on that right-hand corner and it says 0.45% of that goes to the school foundation program account, rather than running it through the SIPA and over there, it just comes down and then in the LSRA, what the engrossed version does, it just takes that 4.5% and runs it to the school foundation program. Much simpler way to get it there. You don't need the SIPA account to run it through there. So that's what the bill does.
Senator, does it still do the $10 million to the penitentiary fund?
Mr. Chairman, it does. That will come out rather than the SIPA. That just comes out of the LSRA, and it's an auto transfer of $10 million to the penitentiary capital construction account. So that still stays in there too. Again, that's another coffee cup, but sometimes, when you're actually saving for something makes sense. But that's what the bill does, Mr. Chairman. The other thing I'll tell you, one of the rationales for doing this is 3 years ago in 2024, the legislature set up the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund Reserve Account. So we created another coffee can and we set up the Common School Permanent Land Fund Reserve Account. And the reason we did that, having working with the treasurer's office for a number of years, this was a 3-year endeavor to try to get those accounts The purpose of that was to provide enough money in those reserve accounts that the treasurer could then take the corpus of those and invest them in what you call higher illiquidity assets. You get a premium for the longer that you can invest that money, particularly in some of the instruments that the treasurer's office does. So the idea is to try to buffer those accounts so we could get higher rate of returns. Almost 40% of our general fund this year is coming from investment earnings. It's the one gift that keeps on giving, that precludes the ability to increase taxes because we're increasing our investment earnings. The thing that was really putting a drag on our ability to do that was if you follow this dotted line, so that's the account we set up, all right, the permanent mineral trust fund reserve account. You look at that. But if you see that dotted arrow below there, dot, dot, dot goes down and then it has this little thing that says transfer from the permanent mineral Wyoming trust fund reserve account, $89.8 million. We've eliminated, was called the quote, the guarantee. So the guarantee, that money was going to fulfill that whole 1.25%. And I didn't bring it, Mr. Chairman, but what that effectively was doing, it was draining that reserve account for the very purposes of what we set it up for, is to get a higher rate of return on the corpus of the permanent mineral trust fund, because it's draining that money out of there. So you look at that, this is from 2025. It basically took almost $90 million out of that account and put it into the SIPA account. If you look at the long-term profile on that, if you look out 2 bienniums, the reserve account goes to zero. But the biggest drain on it was that guarantee. So basically what we've done is we're going to do the full 0.45% into the school foundation program, but that's going to come out of the LSRA. So we leave the reserve account alone. We provide that funding to the school foundation program out account with that transfer. So Mr. Chairman, it's inherently complicated, and the SIPA repeal is designed to start to uncomplicate it. So you don't have to spend 8 to a decade on appropriations and capital finance committee. It flows the money like it similarly did before. You just don't have to launder it through 2 or 3 different accounts. So Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'd stand for any questions.
Thank you, Senator, for being here. Thank you for that explanation. Vice Chair Tarver, you have a question?
Senator, thanks for being here and presenting this. And I would just like to hear the argument of why they would have set it up like this, just out of curiosity.
Senator?
So it was an evolutionary process, because I've been here since the SIPA was originally created. It was originally set up, if you go into the statutes, to provide a pot of money for strategic projects, right? Big projects. So think about, now we have the energy funds and some of these other funds. That was kind of the conceptual thing. And so eventually it morphed into something else. And in my time on appropriations, my first year or 2 on appropriations, what it turned into was a slush fund for the appropriations committee. And I hate to say that, but that's my view. That may not be some of my colleagues' view, but you've heard it, you're either going to have to take it out of the general fund or you're borrowing it out of the LSRA. I don't know hardly any members that come up and said, hey, there's $238 million on the SIPA. I've got a little project back in my side of the state that I want to appropriate out of SIPA. So it evolved to a certain degree as that became where the appropriations committee kind of did what they wanted with the money and moved it in certain directions. The other thing that evolved in that, I was in the Senate. So this was created, I believe, in 2013 is when they set the SIPA up. 2018 is when we created the other box over there, and that's called the Great Compromise. And so, so we started with this strategic investment project account, and then through a series of budget amendments and negotiations and stuff, we wanted to carve out more money. So we just put another box on there, and then we decided that that box wasn't good enough. So then we wanted to put a guarantee. So this has been an evolution, convolution. it evolved to become more convoluted as we went. And we never go back and say, can we clean this up? And then we created the additional reserve accounts. And so this is retrospect to say this was an evolutionary process that convoluted the way the money flows. And now we're going to go back and try to make common sense on how this thing works. I hope that helps explain.
Any other questions? Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Senator Hicks. Glad.
Thank you,
Just did-
Representative. I don't get that often.
Well, I mean it, I guess. I'm glad to see you, but obviously this is very complicated. But I think if this bill passes this committee, it would be very helpful to have another chart on this side that shows what the bill does. Because it's hard to grasp all this information on the floor, the time we have, the constraints that we have, but that's just something, is that possible to get something like that? Because I would find it personally very helpful, but certainly on the floor for people.
Senator,
Mr. Co-Chair, Representative Lawley, we can absolutely do that. And I can have staff pull that together. And I think it will alleviate a lot of the concerns associated with the school foundation program. Because when you read the actual bill, it makes no sense. You have to, picture's worth 1,000 words, but we will supply that to you if when it goes to the floor that you'll have that so you can say, do you want this or do you want this? And so, and we provide the fiscal profile too under the long range. And so you see what it does to the reserve accounts. So on the big picture stuff, but absolutely, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'll make sure that that's available.
fantastic. Anyone else? Well, you did a great job, I guess. You're finished up.
Thank you.
Anything
Well,
else?
we don't know if it's great or not. You haven't voted yet, Mr. Co-Chair.
Do we have anyone else that would like to speak on this bill? Don't everyone rush up at once, please. No one's online? Okay, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the dais. Body, what would we like to do? Move it. Moved by Schmid. Seconded by Campbell. Any discussion? Mr. Knapp, Representative.
I think this is an excellent bill to simplify our finances and not only for the legislation or legislators, but for the public. When it's difficult for a legislator to understand our processes, just think of what it is like for the public. So this will save us having to put the Willy Wonka tipping device down in the rotunda where water would just flow from one to the other and takes away a whole wing of that. So I appreciate this coming back, and I think it's a good thing for us and a good thing for the public.
Thank you. Anyone else? JT Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And I do appreciate that the bill includes the 10 million transfer for the penitentiary account and then also the 45% figure in there. Because if we don't have something like that in the bill, then it's our responsibility every time we do a budget to make sure that we do some sort of transfer. So I like the automatic feature that we left in there. I think that that's a good feature to have and have it set in statute. But I think this does just take out that extra step. So far, I think it's a good bill. So
Thank you. Anyone else? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give kudos to Senator Hicks because I thought you did a very good job in taking something that is a little complex and making it pretty simple. I appreciate that, sir.
Yes. Yeah, please do. Oh, we appreciate it. Martha, no one's arguing. Okay, well, question being called. All right, Mark, would you please?
Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Riggins,
Aye.
Representative Schmidt,
Aye.
Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Excused.
Chairman Heiner left an absentee and he voted aye. This is a due pass 9-0.
Thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you. All right, Senator Rothfuss, I think you're up.
Mr. Vice Chairman, committee, we bring, you know me, I'm Senator Chris Rothfuss. This is Mr. David Kerr. David was a member of our working group that during the interim worked on this legislation related to decentralized unincorporated nonprofit associations. So regrettably, we moved from trying to simplify things to, might be a little bit complicated, but we'll do our best. We are the first state to have these DUNA entities, decentralized unincorporated nonprofit associations. We passed that legislation last year. During the interim, the Blockchain Select Committee worked with stakeholders and people that were now utilizing these DUNA entities and basically have some language cleanups and clarifications. There's no substantive new policy in this legislation. It really is just working through feedback from the stakeholder community and implementing that through statute. The bill appears long, but it actually is just largely one language cleanup, you know, about 107 times, and then a couple of minor revisions. So I'll go through those relatively quickly. On pages 2 and 3, we are swapping out language related to from merely to solely because of clarity and prior case law. On page 4 is actually the most significant change that justifies the bill, was clarification for how an administrator working within this decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association would be defined. And really the key is whether or not they had to be a member to be an administrator of this business entity. They don't have to be. They can be an administrator whether or not they are a member of the DUNA. And so that is clarified. And that's probably the most substantial change and probably not particularly exciting to any of you. Most of the rest of the bill is getting at a change that you now start to see where we're adding decentralized unincorporated in front of nonprofit association or unincorporated nonprofit association. And that is to provide better clarity because we have an unincorporated nonprofit association in statute already. And we want to make sure that there's legal clarity between the DUNA and the UNA, decentralized or traditional. And there's a vehicle also to go back and forth between a DUNA and an UNA if your numbers end up moving too much forward. That becomes part of this as well. So on to page 6, an additional definition of distributed ledger protocol. Again, there's nothing new or contentious about this. It's just providing a little bit of clarification in this particular act. And then I'm just paging through to see if there's anything that isn't clean up language for a little while until we get to on page 18, we're striking a bit of language related to transfers of member interests. And that's clarification about it had previously or other property that confers upon a person a voting right within the nonprofit association. That was providing ambiguity. And so rather than maintaining that language, we just go to freely transferable to another person through conveyance of the membership interest. So again, clarification and diminishment of ambiguity. Further decentralized unincorporated. And then on page 27, adding a definition of charitable purpose, which is just consistent with state and federal law, calling out 501c3 and other associated tax code. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. So this bill is essentially a cleanup bill based on feedback from stakeholders in the industry. And related to those stakeholders, Mr. Kerr has been working with many of them, so it's probably helpful to provide a little bit of context about what is going on. And we actually have some very exciting partners that are now domiciled in the state of Wyoming. I'll let Mr. Kerr talk a little bit about that and maybe give a little bit more background on context.
Any questions for Senator Rothfuss? Sir, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name is David Kerr. I've been working with the Blockchain Commission for the past few years as they contemplated doing this bill. I was one of the people who submitted draft language for it and worked with the Blockchain Committee and have worked with them on revisions. I'm actually a resident of Cheyenne. My company moved here as a result of this bill to help service the entities that were going to start using it. And we've had a lot of great success. The White House Digital Asset Report has actually identified the Wyoming DUNA as the preferred mechanism for this type of operation in the US. And so the kind of key friction that exists in the space right now is that a lot of the projects who do this go to the Cayman Islands, they go outside the United States, and we lose the transparency in where the value of these funds are going. What the DUNA provides is a domestic filing option that is capable of paying state and federal taxes, but it also captures the informational reporting. So when money gets transferred through this entity of people, we actually provide 1099s. We fill out the W-8s, and that's what my company does. And since we've started doing it, we've put almost, well, more than $2 billion, and depending how much it's worth at the time, more than $3 billion of value inside the US informational reporting system. And so we are the US alternative to foreign versions of this where there is no reporting whatsoever. And so the federal response around that has been tremendous. The community response has been very good. It's slow to put these together because we're going from a completely unregulated world to having to comply with US rules in a very orderly process. And so we have 3 right now. The nice thing about those 3, you can go to their websites and you'll see financial statements transparent to anybody, public. It's not, you don't have to be a member, they're not private. You see the financial statements for those entities. And then, like I said, we also have the informational reporting. We have 7 more in the docket to become DUNAs in the near future, and we're working with actually converting some of the Cayman Island entities into US entities. I think our expectation is, right now, I'm sure you're all following the federal legislation around market structure, the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act actually highlights the DUNA, and right now Wyoming's the only one that has one, as the decentralized governance structure that makes that bill work. So there will be a lot more volume of projects going through the Wyoming DUNA. So it's been a tremendous success. And so I think with that, I'll leave it and just kind of, that's the update for how we're doing.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Please.
Just one more point to add on the scale of this. The largest DUNA that we have is an entity called Uniswap, and Uniswap holds upwards of $2 billion worth of total assets that they manage through their DUNA. But the total number of transactions that they've implemented are estimated over $4 trillion since their inception. So very significant, one of the world leaders, if not the world leader in this space. And we were fortunate through the work of the last few years with Mr. Kerr and other stakeholders to be the leader in this space.
Any questions? Representative Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen. As I read through those first paragraphs, I started to think I've got this large language modeling going in my head as I've seen this repeated a bunch. So did you have any general pushback or any particular concerns that people came to you that you might share with us that they were addressed?
Senator.
I'll yield to Mr. Kerr.
Mr. Kerr.
The most tremendous one was what Senator Rothfuss referenced in regard to who could be an administrator. There was confusion in the original drafting, and so people weren't sure. The reality is it probably doesn't matter that much. Administrators inside of a DUNA is just simply a vocabulary lesson for calling an agent another name, so we had clarity. Agency law and contract law applies to that relationship, whether or not it's called an administrator or an agent. But the lack of clarity in how to apply it was still causing confusion. And so this was the suggested language that would give people the best clarity on how an administrator would approach. The other one, and the reason why there are probably 230 decentralized unincorporated nonprofit associations corrections here, for whatever reason, the convention of using the full DUNA and then either the adjective its or shortening to unincorporated association caused so much confusion that we decided to just put it in full everywhere and take the ambiguity out. And so that was one that got a lot of feedback for in the middle of a sentence when it switched to the shortened form, it just wasn't bringing clarity with it. And so we said, we'll add it everywhere and then we'll have clarity despite, making this one change 230 times or so.
Thank you.
Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you guys for being here. Senator Roth, always good to see you and nice to meet you, Mr. Kerr. And either one of you can kind of answer this question. I do feel, I'd say, Mr. Kerr, I feel sort of lost when we get these blockchain bills because I feel like I'm walking in the middle of something I already don't really fully understand. But you did bring some clarity and I really appreciate that. One of the things that I heard feedback on this bill that I think is good to talk about is the idea of maybe you're bringing transparency, but what about privacy concerns? Should an individual citizen be concerned about privacy concerns in a bill like this? And if so, what have we done about that?
Mr. Kerr.
Interestingly enough, the SF 82 about the registered agent requiring beneficial information was a conversation that you all had quite a lot recently. These entities were excluded from that bill. The reason for that is the way these are constructed is they represent thousands of people who have a form of digital currency. That digital currency allows them to vote as an organization on a pool of assets they possess together. And so the question there would be, there's concerns over, well, who owns that? The restrictions in the bill, distributions are prohibited. Certain types of transfers of property are distributed under the DUNA and the UNA as it sits. That's what makes it a nonprofit entity. Through certain exceptions for compensation or awards and furtherance of the purpose of the organization, grants of value can be made. That's where that informational reporting structure that we discussed and are talking about, we want to know where the value comes out of it. So we're a little less concerned over who the members are because we couldn't know them. And they would be formed into a general partnership, whether the DUNA existed or not, and that would create its own problem. So because they have this weird combination of what they own has some value, but it also has governance that controls another value, we've kind of shrunk the world. And we've kind of created an old issue over how when more than two people do anything together, what their responsibilities together are. So what this does is it provides a clear entity shield so that it can meet its real world responsibilities. It can file tax returns, it can contract with banks, it can have a bank account. It has to follow certain regulatory compliance. We've gotten bank accounts for our DUNAs through going through bank compliance procedures. So they're comfortable with it to that extent. But you're right, we don't know who the entity members are, but we know very much where any of the funds are going to. So we have programmatic checks to make sure it's not going to sanctioned countries like North Korea. We follow the OFAC standards for wallet checks. We have real person identity on someone receiving payment through my company. The law doesn't require it, but that's how we do it. And then there's also the W8, W9 component. So the flow of funds out of these entities is very much known. The membership itself, because there's thousands of individual people, we don't know. And what the premise that we've kind of worked both at the federal level and the state level when figuring out how to make sense of all this is, if the entity can't do harm, if the entity can't do anything without having to then file the right reports at the right time, we just put reporting in at the right time. We know who's getting paid, we know why they're getting paid. As far as the membership itself, it's a collection of thousands of people.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you for that. That was very good. What I'm hearing is that you balance some different things. You balance the privacy issue with the need to report and the transparency that can come from that. particularly for certain filings of government forms and other filings that creates that financial transparency, but then protecting those privacy interests. Did I hear that right? Is that another way to say it?
That's a great way of saying it. I would say so. It was a reaction to a change in activity requiring a different form of regulation. And so we asserted the appropriate regulation instead of trying to make the old way work. We tried to find a new way.
Thank you.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you guys, Senator. Thank you guys for being here today. I'm a very simple fella, so I'm going to take a stab at this and tell me if I'm catching what you guys are throwing. Basically, what you guys are doing is providing a structured format to bring these you're bringing Wyoming up to speed as far as the legality and the structure for this. And if I'm catching what you're saying, you're providing for a tangible, while these are digital assets, there's a way to, or if somebody was to go bankrupt or something, then there's a tangible way to get the value out of that. Am I in the ballpark? And thank you.
Mr. Kerr.
I'd say you're very much in the ballpark. I would start with one. Wyoming leads the way on this. We're the first DUNA. West Virginia and Alabama are both considering DUNAs this session. So they've moved through committee, and I think they're going to adopt similar legislation to Wyoming. But Wyoming's the first. As far as the entity protections, I think you have it exactly right. There's the technology that's very complicated, and then there's the reality that it brings people together. And under US law, when people come together, we have responsibilities. And so it's the framework that explains the people part. We're voting together, we're acting together, we're forming a common enterprise together. That needs rules, and that's what the Wyoming DUNA does.
Senator.
So the Blockchain Select Committee's mantra has always been regulate to enable rather than regulate to restrict. Recognize that as this technology advances, there needs to be a governance structure that ensures that good actors can do good things with it and bad actors shouldn't be able to act. And so we've worked, and this is one of those instances where we identified a substantial technology, an international demand, but no tangible governance structure that can allow Mr. Kerr, for example, to do what he's doing now and facilitate taxation and appropriate registrations and transparency on the spending and everything else. So we built that, and we built it in partnership, obviously, with the stakeholders so that they were fully satisfied upon startup. And that's why other states are looking to us with the copy and paste keys ready to do the same thing.
So I have a question. What's the potential of this bill if we pass it and put it into statute versus not getting this bill passed into the statute?
Well, the DUNA has been passed into statute since 2024. And so these amendments for today, probably not very much. I think the goal around this bill, well, the reason why the DUNA itself was so long was that this is the frontier, and we want to provide citizens building these projects the most clarity as possible on how to do it correctly. And so anywhere that there's obstacles in understanding, which we addressed, there was a lot of feedback on not knowing how the rules applied. It invites an opportunity for it to be misunderstood. Misunderstanding is how we ended up with 2,500 of these entities inside the Cayman Islands already. And so we're just trying to make Wyoming have the guidebook, have the instructions, and just where we can be the most clear, we want to be the most clear. Structurally, you're right, it doesn't change very much, but it's the burden of trying to lead the way and show people there is a viable, compliant path.
I guess that's what more of my question. I apologize. I didn't reference the question correctly. Would those clients perhaps come here if we have this clarity?
Yeah, I would say the biggest obstacle in people adopting the DUNA is a lack of familiarity with it. And so clarity is probably the thing we struggle with the most. So any help with clarity helps our biggest communication obstacle.
Thank you. Any further questions? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again. In line with the chairman's question, this having a structure, it is going to be attractive. This is the future. We're bringing us into the future. We're setting the structure where we want to be. But if I'm catching again, what you're saying is because we'll have a structure already in place that will be attractive to these businesses because they'll know in advance what they're doing, what they're looking at coming forward, correct?
Senator.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we are already attractive. We are the world leader. We're what everyone is looking at. This is a bug fix, right? That's what this bill is. It's like your update patch that your phone gets every once in a while, right? It's our first one for Duna to try and address some of the concerns.
Thank you. Any further follow-ups? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to speak on this? Okie dokie. Is there anyone online? All right. I guess we'll close public comment and bring it back to the dais. Committee, what would you like to do? Moved by Lawley, seconded by Larson. Any discussion? Question being called. Mark, you're up.
Voting on Senate File 22 with no amendments. Representative Campbell,
Aye.
Representative Knapp,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Lawley,
Aye.
Representative Riggins,
Aye.
Representative Schmidt,
Aye.
Representative Tarver,
Aye.
Representative Weber,
Excused.
Chairman Heiner left a absentee and he voted aye. This is a do pass, 8-0-1.
Wonderful. Representative Singh, I assume you're gonna handle this on the floor, I hope. Senator, are you ready for Senate File 20?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. So Senate File 20, data privacy government entities. This is actually the third year that the Blockchain Select Committee has brought it to the legislature. And each time it's just failed on one of those dying on the vine situations. No one's ever voted it down. It's a good bill. But you know how it is sometimes where time runs out and this bill goes with it. So here's swing number 3, and we're hoping that it gets across the finish line this time. Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this bill is to provide data protections for citizens relative to the government. It is as strong as we can get it, and that's not as strong as we would like it, candidly. But we worked very hard to provide some protections and some requirements for all of our state and local government agencies to be adhering to best practices, and we give a lot of flexibility, recognizing that it's a challenge sometimes for them to uphold laws and respect privacy. And so I think I can speak for my co-chairman on the select committee. I'd love to go a lot further, but this is about as far as we're capable of getting, and I'll walk you through it, and you'll see some of the limitations where it would be nice if we could go further, but we've got things like Public Records Act and other things that make it a little bit hard to fully protect privacy. So walking through the bill, and let's see, I'll walk through the engrossed bill, but my notes are on the other one. So we have on page 2, definitions, de-identified data is going to be allowed. Generally, government entity is going to deal with everything except for law enforcement. And you'll see that we have a definition of law enforcement carved out momentarily, and I'll talk about that. Identified or identifiable natural person. This applies specifically to natural persons, not a person in the sense of a corporation. So it's carved out as a protection of data for natural persons. Page 3, Romanet 4, law enforcement agency. We had to create our own definition. There's no kind of appropriate definition for law enforcement, which surprised us. So that's why we've got a definition here. And it's basically anyone that is directly enforcing laws is going to end up being exempt in their capacity as law enforcement, because law enforcement already has rather substantial data privacy management, and we just didn't even want to get into those weeds. They do their own thing, and that seemed to work out okay. Personal data is what we're trying to protect the privacy of, and that comes specifically to information that is linked or reasonably linkable to an identified or identifiable natural person or personal digital identity and does not include de-identified data. So that's what we'll be attempting to protect as well as we can. On to page 4. So there's a couple things this bill does, and this is the first concept, and this is actually the original impetus of the bill. The paragraph A, page 4, no government entity shall purchase, sell, trade, or transfer personal data without the express written consent of the natural person whom the personal data references. Now, that's where we'd like to stop the bill, but then we couldn't. So we've got the except as otherwise provided clauses that we had to work through. And this comes from circumstances where, for example, the state of Wyoming has purchased data sets about citizens. And then those data sets can become public records or could be sold. And there was a lot of concern that the Wyoming state government was basically generating personally identifiable or private information about citizens that was unnecessary for them to do their jobs. And so the rest of this bill you'll see is really an attempt to get government entities to minimize their data collection, to not ever benefit from transacting, like selling. For example, many states, departments of motor vehicle sell their DMV data. That's a normal thing. We don't do that in the state of Wyoming. We haven't done that. And this makes it very clear nobody gets to do things like that. So government, the exception on Romanet 1 here, a government entity may transfer personal data to another government entity, provided that the other government entity complies with this article. Romanet 2, a government entity may transfer data to a non-government entity that they're contracted with, as long as that entity follows the terms of this legislation, right? So you can subcontract out, but they can't be disseminating it further or selling it or trading it or anything along those lines. Page 5, Romanet 3. This is the general relief valve that we've had a lot of entities come up and say, well, what if we have this problem that's unforeseen at this point in time? Romanet 3 says that a government entity may petition the elected governing person or body with authority over the government entity for an exception to this section on a case-by-case basis. So what does that mean? Every government entity that is the bureaucracy level has an elected above them in the chain of command. That body or individual can just publicly declare, it has to be public, in a letter, that we are going to provide an exemption specifically for a certain circumstance for the next 2 years, and they can continue to repeat that, but they have to provide a justification. So it holds the government accountable. If you can't work within this legislation, if you can't keep things private and you want to sell something or buy something or trade something, then you have to come out to the public and say, we're doing this, and this is why. And then that individual can accept the public backlash if there is any, which is pretty much how it should be. So it makes sure that if you need a workaround for this, then it's going to be done in a transparent way, and you have to have justification. And then the Romanet 4 just indicates that HIPAA and FERPA compliance satisfies this as well, because there are exceptions built into federal law where we're preempted. The B paragraph. Any person, any current or former Wyoming resident, or the resident's legal authority representative may request a copy of their personal data from any government entity maintaining it. Now, this is a little different from Public Records Act, right? Because this can actually contain private data and personally identifiable data that you wouldn't be able to get from a Public Records Act, but it's about you. And so it basically says you have the right to access data about you. And that's true throughout government, and that you would have a right to correct it as well as what we see in the C paragraph, or challenge it. So getting to page 6, once you get this data, you can object to the accuracy, completeness, pertinence, timeliness, relevance, retention, dissemination, etc., or denial of access. And there's a process that They will go through a review. They'll be obligated to and to respond and to either correct it or make a note of why they're not correcting it, and then notify the residents on page 7, notify the resident on page 7. This D paragraph on page 7 is very important. And again, I would like to have it differently, but this is where we ended up having to be. To the extent that a provision of this article conflicts with another provision of state or federal law, the other provision shall control. And then explicitly, nothing in this article shall be construed to abrogate any disclosure of data or public records under the Wyoming Public Records Act, etc. So basically what that says is this act defers to any other statutory requirement or provision to protect data or release data or whatever the case may be. So this yields to other things instead of the other way around, and particularly the Public Records Act, where most of the big concerns with this legislation were, well, how would this affect the Public Records Act? So it's very explicit. This yields to the Public Records Act. If somebody has a right to information, they will continue to have the right to that information. The next part of the bill gets to data retention policies, and we see that at the bottom of page 7. So personal data collection retention by government entities. You see, each government entity that collects or retains personal data shall adopt, enforce, and maintain a policy regarding the collection, access, retention, security, and use of that data consistent with federal and state law. So that says every government entity has to have a policy, and they've got to work through that policy. And you see some provisions associated with that. The B paragraph, no government entity shall collect or maintain any data any more than necessary. So basically, don't collect things if you don't need it and can't justify it by policy. And then you see on on line 7, all personal data collected and maintained shall be necessary for a specific purpose identified in the adopted policies of the government entity. So we're not putting restrictions on what can or can't be collected actually here. A government entity could collect whatever they feel they need to, but they have to provide a written justification for collecting personally identifiable data. And that seems like a rational threshold. So they're not just collecting things willy-nilly because it would be handy. And they have to think through the process. And then a similar provision, paragraph C on page 8, relates to the retention policies, that no government entity shall maintain personal data for longer than 3 years without a written policy identifying the extended retention and providing a reasonable justification for that extended retention period. So again, they can keep it as long as they want to, but they have to have a good reason to keep it for longer than 3 years. And we actually have data retention schedules in the archives for certain public records. And that, as you can see in lines 16 through 18, are a justification. If statute currently says you have to keep this record for this amount of time, you've got a written policy already in place due to statute. So we're not trying to change anyone's policies, but if you don't have a justification for why you're keeping, Representative Singh's 4th grade, yeah, exactly. Your honor roll record, right? In the 4th grade, and maybe your attendance record, maybe. Yeah. If you don't have a reason to be keeping those for 74 years, maybe you shouldn't. And that seems like a good policy. Again, it would be nice if it were stronger, but this is a start, and we don't have anything like this. Bottom of page 8, the D paragraph indicates again that HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, you're all familiar with that, and FERPA, which is the education similar provision in federal law. If you have a policy consistent with either of those, that policy is deemed consistent with this section as a justification and is fully compliant. And then going into section 3 and 4, this is a phased roll-in, and we see section 3 requires that not later than January 1st, 2027, the state chief information officer will provide, working with the archivist, will provide sample policies so they can do some of the lifting for entities that might not have the acumen. And then in section 4, we have a phased rollout where on July 1st, 2028, counties, cities, public institutions of higher education, or towns shall go into effect. And then July 1st, 2029, all other entities will go into effect. And then what isn't really clear based on how Section 5 is written is state agencies go into effect in 2027 on July 1st. So there's plenty of time to get this going, and that's intentional. It'll take a little bit of time to write up those policies. But Mr. Chairman and committee, talking about the Senate changes, that's a good point. All we did to get to the engrossed version was on page my apologies. Where is there it is. On page 6, in the Romanettes, you will see the word review 3 times. That used to be investigate, but there was concern that investigate sounded too formal, like you had to have an actual investigation. So we changed it to review, which seemed to make folks happier. And then the other aspect that was changed was when you are on the bottom of page 6 with the Romanet 3 paragraph, it says, if the objection is found to lack merit after review, provide the resident the opportunity to have a statement reflecting the resident's views maintained with the personal data in question. It previously said maintained and disseminated. And the concern there from our state auditor was there's really no mechanism when data is being transferred out to neatly fit the note into data that's being transferred out. So it was logistically unworkable. And so we just struck and disseminated. And that's the sum total of the changes. Be happy to answer any questions.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, Representative Singh. Thanks for being here. On page 4, that paragraph A, I'm just curious, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I just want your thoughts on this. So it says, no government entity shall purchase, sell, trade, or transfer personal data. So that transfer personal data language, would that apply to, let's say they have a spreadsheet with 1,000, citizens and a bunch of their data points, and they wanted to run that data through like ChatGPT to maybe pull out some information from those data points. Is that considered a transfer through this bill? And the reason why I ask is if they upload that Excel sheet into ChatGPT and then ChatGPT has a data leak or something, then their data has been leaked into the public. So that's kind of my question. Does this bill protect people from their data being uploaded into an AI platform?
Senator.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think the high level answer is yes, it would, because if you're transferring it, then it would be prohibited. There would be potentially ways, depending on whether you're training, whether you're working in an API mode, where you can have it anonymized and protected. There are ways that you could work with that. But in the standard, I'm using the free version of any generically commercial AI. I think it would be inappropriate pursuant to this to be uploading for consideration to that AI. And that's a challenge that we're all going to be working with in the not so distant future, because as most of you probably know, we're all using, for example, the Microsoft suite, and it integrates with its Copilot, and Copilot is reading what you're working on, but they do have privacy barriers associated with Copilot where it's not supposed to be training on that. So an interesting question that we'll probably have to wrestle with in the years ahead. Mr. Chairman.
Follow up. Representative Singh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And part of that issue has to do with the differences between the large language models. So you have your open source. And so those open source AIs that we use, like ChatGPT or Gemini or some of these other ones, they're different from, say, a program like Claude. and that all the information that goes into it is publicly available. Whereas if you use a closed source language model, then that information is more private. And so that's going to be a debate that we need to have just as a state of Wyoming, really, if our government is going to be using some of these tools, which make things exponentially easier and more transparent. What type of language models are we going to be using? And so I think that's something that ought to be on the table for our interim. But as far as this bill is concerned, I believe that this covers the base that you're talking about, and it's primarily within government to government type of interactions.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Lawley, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thanks for staying. Welcome, Daniel. Interestingly enough, this bill I've gotten a lot of feedback on this bill. And I would say in the last several days, it literally is blowing up my phone. And the concern seems to be that this actually makes the privacy concerns of individuals, it doesn't really do much to protect them and possibly puts more at risk. Again, the way you've described the bill, I don't think that's the intent of the bill, but I would like you to have the opportunity to respond to those concerns that it actually creates more privacy concerns.
Gotcha. Thank
Senator.
you, Mr. Chairman, Representative. And I've seen those notes also, and I just find them wholly inaccurate. As I said when we started, Representative Singh and I would love to take this privacy much, much further. But we've worked on it for years, and it is really a challenge to get to the point where we have true privacy as citizens, because the government, unfortunately, really wants to know what you're doing at any given time so that they can do their job. And so we put as much into this in terms of data privacy and protection as we could put together. And if you can think of ways that we can make this stronger, we're on board, right? That's what we want as well. But we couldn't. So to see these emails that I know are coming out, and they are from one organization, they're kind of clones of each other, and it's the same note over and over again. And I understand if the general public is feeling like we're doing something that's going to erode their privacy, they would be upset, and they should be, and we would be as well. But as I noted, we have built in requirements that the government can't just do what it already does without good policy. So as with any of our legislation, you have to compare, where does this put us versus where we are now? And I agree, this doesn't put us where I want to be in the end. I want better privacy. I'm about as pro-privacy as you all could imagine, and you've probably seen my other bills, and they all tend to be on that side of things. But where we're at right now is just rubbish. You have no protections. As I mentioned, if the DMV wanted to sell your data to help balance their budget, they would sell your data to help balance your budget. If law enforcement wanted to collect your license plate, now we might actually have a law. Do we have a law yet on the license plate collection? We don't yet, do we? Okay, so they can set up the camera and collect license plates driving by. The university could, although they don't. We actually passed some legislation a number of years ago trying to protect some of the privacy of students, but they were vulnerable for a lot of public information as well. So we're one of the worst states. Despite how much we love privacy, we are one of the worst in terms of actual data privacy in the country, the fewest protections. So this is not perfect. This doesn't get us where I want to go, but I feel it is significantly stronger than where we are right now.
Follow up.
Follow up, please.
Yeah, just thank you for that. I think it is important to, I agree with you, but to respond to those concerns. We receive them and I do read them. But I think I would just wanted you to say that out loud, that we're better off with this than nothing. And so thank you for that.
Representative Singh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just in response to Representative Lawley's question there and that opportunity there, this is not a boogeyman bill. This really just sets a standard that otherwise would not exist at all. And so this, we really worked hard to make sure that we covered our bases, that whenever you're talking about privacy, you also have to recognize that we have the privacy of the individuals in one hand, but also the ability to effectively enforce our laws and offer the services that we're so proud of. So we talk to law enforcement, we talk to the community colleges, and we also, you don't want to make these ladies angry, but the ladies over at the archives, okay? Yeah, they're pretty serious too. And so we just wanted to make sure that everyone was heard. And this is what we came out to. And, you know, I of course, I think it could be stronger. And I think there, as we encounter more technologies and as the government uses different technologies that make the services that we rely on more efficient, we're going to need to have this conversation about data privacy. And so this is our stab at it. And it was done in good faith and a lot of collaboration. But this is where we're at. So hope you consider it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any further questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. You addressed my question I was going to have in section 4. You took care of that. So to follow up when it talks about lesser jurisdictions and the time frame, appreciate that. Do you expect there'll be any financial cost to lesser jurisdictions complying that and adding this in any way? Thank you.
Who would like it? Go ahead.
It can take a little bit of time if you don't have a written policy. That's one of the concerns, but that's why we're having ETS put together sample policies, and they'll do those for those smaller jurisdictions so that they won't have to come up with their own. And I think that's an important part of the legislation. And ETS is perfectly comfortable with it. Some of the larger entities have come back with concerns about it taking work from them, but we've talked with them about the fact that, again, they can write just about whatever policy they want. They just have to write down the policy and follow the policy and justify it. So it doesn't necessarily require a massive upgrade, but boy, if you've written a policy down which says we're going to leak like a sieve because we have bad data and privacy protections, I don't think that policy lasts very long, and that's a good thing, right? Because there's going to be pressure that comes back and says, what you guys should really upgrade your system. So we feel comfortable that it will put an administrative burden on all agencies and governments from the standpoint of they have to think this through, and they may not have done that in the past.
Follow up.
Thanks, gentlemen. I want to echo what my associate over here said about the concerns about this. And as I'm reading this bill, I'm like, well, maybe this isn't the right bill they were talking about. So thank you for that, and I appreciate your efforts.
Any further questions? Gentlemen, thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Robert Short, Commerce County Commissioner. I serve as the Vice Chairman for the National Association of Counties on Technology and Telecommunication. And this is a big topic, obviously, across the country. Here in Wyoming, of course, we have a working group that we are trying to wrap our heads around data privacy. And we are very much in support of this bill. But we do have concerns about entities not having enough wherewithal inside of their construct to be able to build a data policy that's robust enough to comply with the rules that'll be set forth should this be adopted. So we're hopeful that in that we have an opportunity to find a template, or if nothing else, guidance on how we can go forward. We do expect costs to be associated with it, to the good representative's previous question, because the only free thing I remember is nothing. Along those lines, one of the questions that I have is associated with the transfer of data. So should this become law, would, for example, the past event where Wyoming citizens' data was transferred to the Department of Justice in a personally identifiable manner that included their driver's license numbers, the last 4 of their social security numbers, would that have been prohibited? Secondly, another question that comes to mind is, for example, inside of county government. One office may encounter a citizen who is less than enjoyable And so perhaps they may print out a picture of that citizen with their name and pass it to another office saying, should this person come in, be aware we've had difficulties dealing with them. Is that in violation of this intended law? Because they transfer data between each other, and obviously it's personally identifiable data because it's a picture of someone with their name written on it. Those are the concerns that, just top of mind. And again, very much in favor of this. I've been working inside Commerce County for the last 5 years to develop an acceptable use policy, which is the foundation for the next step, which is data policy, which then transcends into artificial intelligence usage, et cetera. And a question was presented by the good representative from, I believe, the Green River area earlier about utilizing AI and loading personally identifiable information into AI. We know that AI language models are being utilized that are not enterprise models. In other words, the quote unquote free version. We know the free version actually you pay for with data. So are we already violating that by utilizing that particular type of AI model? And how then will we police that going forward? And I know to the good senator's words, it's not perfect. We have to start somewhere, and I agree with that completely. These are all just concerns and considerations that I think we need to take into account as we move forward to better hone what we'll start with in a way that benefits the citizens as intended. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll shut my pie hole.
And no, that was wonderful. Thank you, Representative Lawley.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Thanks for being here. You've raised some really good points. I think some of them could be worked up. I want to go to the rule-making idea because again, I serve a very rural county, small municipalities. And do you feel like Senator Office's comments concerning the development of some model policies that would advance local communities' ability to sort of customize them, but to get that part of it done, where they begin to develop the policies, which I think some of the other concerns could be policy related, that could be done. Obviously, your organization could be helpful in that too, but does that address some of those concerns for you?
Mr. Short.
Mr. Chair, Representative Lawley, yes, if that language is robust enough that actually helps those smaller entities. And indeed, Commerce County can use all the help that we can get in establishing what that kind of framework looks like, because obviously going from 0 to 1 is the greatest expenditure of energy you'll ever have. Going from 1 to 2 is much, much less. So yes, ma'am.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Short. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself and whip it on us.
Vice Chair, I'm Jeff Kleins. I'm the Director of ETS and the State CIO. So appreciate the time today. I come just to share a little bit of the technical context and practical implementations from this. And it's referenced in our fiscal note. I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail and answer any technical questions you may have. So while the bill mandates that the data not be retained longer than 3 years without justification, we attempt to do a good assessment of our current technical architecture and systems in the state. Most, if not of all the agencies, applications and systems that retain that data don't have the current ability to archive, de-identify, and things as required by this bill. So we would work with them over the ensuing several years to understand how we either upgrade the applications, replace the applications, or something to do this. So there may be, while it's not recorded in the fiscal note now, there may be future appropriations needed to become fully compliant with the intent of this bill. Further, as required in Section 3 of the bill, it would require my team and I to have policies created. We stand ready. We have policies created, and we'd be happy to help state agencies and others understand the intent of this bill. Per previous comments, I think the hard part is not necessarily writing it, but adopting the policy and having everybody understand of the intent of the limitations and then the upgrading of the technical systems. The previous conversation is going from 0 to 1's the big lift. I could fully agree with that. And then finally, Bad actors always love to try to take advantage of any loopholes they can. Data disclosure laws, as far as letting citizens, reclaim them, it's going to require state agencies to develop processes to ensure that they're only giving that data to the person who it owns to. And I think the lift to be able to get those policies or those processes in place to be able to validate that you're giving the data to the right person and not to a bad actor is going to be onerous as well. I only say that from a perspective of a cybersecurity. I'm fairly, passionate about making sure we have good processes in place to protect that data, because I feel as public servants, we have an inherent responsibility to make sure we protect that data to the intent and the purpose of the rules and legislature that we have. Some. With that, I will stand by for questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Representative Riggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Klein. This was a question a little bit is the time frame that they want you to have this completed by and the policies, does that seem reasonable?
Mr. Klein.
Mr. Vice Chair. So yes, Mr. Representative Riggins, I think having the agencies, given that this has been a few years in the making, a lot of state agencies are aware of it and have had the time to look at, okay, what policies would we need to adopt and to be able to draft those policies. So I think a lot of the agencies will have the policies without any problem. I think the policies may say, until we can get our technical systems into a place, we're going to have to retain data longer than is intended. So I think the policies will be there. I think to match the intent of this law will take a little bit longer.
Any further questions? Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Taylor, please.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Erin Taylor. I represent the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees, and I do want to echo what you heard from the co-chairman sitting behind me, that this has been a collaborative process. For example, the exception that's written into the bill to go to the governing body is something that was of concern to the colleges. I don't really know of an example of what that might be, but those are publicly elected trustees running those colleges. And so the transparency aspect of that happening in public was something that they thought was important. And being the decision makers for those bodies was important for the colleges. Another thing that I wanted to mention, representing the colleges and the family that's involved with the colleges, the Community College Commission is the state agency. So they have long been involved with data for students and have a longstanding practice, of course, of keeping that data private. But do they have the exact policy? That is something that they will work with ETS to make sure that they have that policy. But there's another aspect too that's involved with the Wyoming Statewide Educational Longitudinal Data System, the SLEDS. I think I said that backwards. Statewide Longitudinal Education Data System, the SLEDS. And so the implications of how that system is gathering data is still in question. And we might be reporting back to you to how that works, what they're trying to measure. We're trying to measure students as they're coming through the continuum of the system and even going out into the workforce. So that's maybe one example of, we'll get back to you and let you know how that works. Also the systems involved with collecting that data just might not have that ability just yet. So all of those things are, I think, consistent with what you heard from ETS and the county commissioners, et cetera. So appreciate the committee working with everybody on this bill, and we'll just stand by to make sure we can provide more information as this progresses.
Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Do we have anyone else who would like to testify? Anyone online? Representative Singh and Senator, would you like to come up and make any comments on some of the concerns on this bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first concerns that were raised specifically about release of records, for example, the voting records, and they include the social security number. That was already a violation of Wyoming state statute explicitly. And the belief there was that a federal preemption took out the Wyoming state statute. So This is actually weaker on that than the existing statute related to voter specific personally identifiable information and protected information. But the applicable provision of this bill would be page 4, Romanet 1, where a government entity may transfer personal data to another government entity provided that the other government entity complies with this article. So that's a pretty broad provision as long as you have compliance. In that circumstance, again, there wouldn't have been compliance. This would not have given a free pass. Statute already didn't give a free pass, but the federal preemption would trigger page 7, paragraph D, which is to the extent that state or federal law conflicts, then this defers. So I wish we would have been able to protect on that one. We couldn't have. Existing statute couldn't have. So I think that's important. On the transfer, for example, of a picture of somebody, that would just be the state to state transfer, government to government transfer. They would be obligated to abide by the same statute. So that would be covered by it under the Romanet 1 paragraph. And I appreciate, ETS's description of how things would roll forward. I thought that was very good. And we've obviously worked with ETS over the years that we've been working on this, having those conversations. So we have confidence in their ability to put together some good sample policies right down to the special districts and make sure that they have the support that Representative Lawley was talking about. So appreciate the testimony.
Singh, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I can say is that I would agree with all the wonderful remarks from
Okay.
my Senate colleague.
All right, appreciate it. Any more questions? All right, we will close public testimony and Representative Lawley moves the bills. Second by Campbell. Any discussion? Question being called. There's some discussion. Representative Lawley.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment in light of some of the different testimony that clearly there's still work to be done as we move through this, but we have to start this process now. It does matter greatly to people how the status is dealt with. And I think we have to start, and as the representative from the community colleges mentioned, kind of discover some things along the way and address those as they come up. I think it's important to begin now.
Couldn't agree more. Any more discussion? Question being called.
You're voting on Senate File 20 engrossed. Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Lawley.
Aye.
Representative Riggins.
Aye.
Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Weber. Chairman Heiner left an absentee vote. That was yes. This is a due pass, 8-0-1. I'm sorry.
Good to go?
Could you excuse Weber?
Yes, excused.
Thank you.
All right, committee, I think we've done our work for the day and this meeting is adjourned.